Now, we all know that the debt clock is ticking and that the federal government is racking up trillions of dollars of debt, which is going to have to be paid off at some point in the future by our generation, more likely our children and our grandchildren. And it's unsustainable. It's going to cause immense harm. It is something that has been ignored as of late. But we are unable to move forward with any kind of constructive solution to this problem or putting us on a path to deal with this problem because the President of the United States simply refuses to come to an agreement in terms of how to deal with this, and in fact doesn't even bother to mention it. We also have an issue here that is part of the problem, and that is inefficient, ineffective use of taxpayer money here in Washington. The money that is hard-earned by people back at home and then deducted from their payroll income and then as a tax and sent here to the federal government is not always used to be an effective, efficient way of performing the necessary and essential issues that the federal government deals with and that we talk about here every day. Instead, it goes into programs that can only be deemed as waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's what I've been trying to highlight in these last 15 weeks as we deal with the waste of the week. Today, what I'd like to talk about is a sweet deal. Everyone likes a sweet deal, right? Well, no, not quite everyone, and not always. And unfortunately, in this case, what is a sweet deal for some is actually a raw deal for the American taxpayer. I'm talking about the sugar subsidy. Currently, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, issues loans to sugar producers and allows them to repay those loans with raw sugar if sugar prices fall below a certain price. After obtaining the sugar through this so-called loan, the USDA then ends up with a bunch of sugar that it needs to resell, and it resells that sugar at a discounted price. As a result, these loans function as a price support for sugar, ensuring that sugar producers never sell their product below the price determined by the government, not the fair market, but by the government. This cost taxpayers nearly $300 million in 2013 alone. I don't have the figures yet for 2014. I assume they're the same, or may fluctuate a little bit up, a little bit down, depending on the world sugar price. Now, if this sweet loan deal for sugar producers isn't enough, $300 million a year cost, there's more. In addition to providing a subsidy to sugar producers through the program I just described, the federal government also enforces a system of quotas and tariffs on imported sugar, thereby blocking Americans' fair market access to cheaper sugar and resulting in a large difference between the international or global price of sugar and domestic sugar prices. In fact, the USDA's sugar program has caused the price of American sugar to be about 40% higher than the global price, resulting in an estimated cost to consumers of $3.5 billion annually between the years 2009 and 2012. So when you take these two programs and put them together, they effectively function as a mass federal subsidy of sugar, which drives up prices for consumers and provides a double benefit to the sugar industry. As a result of these two sweet policies, thousands of jobs in sugar-raising industries, particularly candy manufacturers, have been lost, and the American taxpayer pays for it all. Now, why were these policies put in place in the first place? Well, the global price of sugar was much higher in the early 1980s. So the idea was that higher sugar prices would result in more sugar growers. And the more sugar growers we had, the more sugar would be produced, thus lowering the price. That's how fair and free markets work. It's a supply and a demand issue. But government interference through subsidies distorts the free market price of goods. And in the case of sugar, it results in a direct hit to the taxpayer and much higher costs for the consumer of sugar-based products. To this day, the sugar subsidy remains a giveaway to sugar producers and a raw deal for sugar consumers. Ice cream, donuts, cakes, pies are, we know they're not the healthiest things that we eat, but they're some of the more desirable things that we like to eat, particularly after we've been forced to eat broccoli and greens, and our mothers raised us on, you can't have ice cream or cake or a pie after dinner unless you eat what's on your plate. And so we would suffer through eating some of that green stuff. I don't mean to belittle that. I think it is healthy and we should do that, but I'm not going to mandate that the public, government tell the public what to eat. Nevertheless, it is these products and many, many others that incorporate the cost of sugar in making the product that drives up the price of the product simply because of the subsidies that are provided by this government through its policies to sugar producers. It ends up in companies not being able to provide the jobs that they would like to provide, be the dynamic industry that they would like to, and puts them in a less than competitive position against our overseas producers. Many companies in my home state of Indiana have been affected by this subsidy, and let me just give you a couple of examples. The Albanese Confectionery Group, Inc. is a renowned Indiana-based manufacturer of confections, including the world's best gummy bears. In Germany, they call them gummies. Here we call them gummies. Gold label chocolates and other products. Very successful manufacturer. But they estimate it could save $3 million annually by having access to sugar from the world market price. But no, they're not allowed to do that. They're forced to buy it at the U.S. subsidized producer price, which is as I indicated earlier, roughly 40% more than what they could otherwise pay. Lewis Bakeries, headquartered in Evansville, Indiana, one of the few remaining independent bakeries in the Midwest and the largest wholesale bakery in Indiana, has the same issue. Artificially high sugar prices contribute directly to increased costs that hamstring budgets of businesses like Lewis Bakeries and other bakeries throughout Indiana. Artificially high sugar prices affect the large companies also, like Kraft Foods. It has a marshmallow and caramel plant in Kendallville, Indiana. And they said that dismantling the sugar program would enhance the competitiveness of U.S. food manufacturers. So if Congress were to terminate the sugar subsidy program, which we've tried to do year after year after year, and it has not succeeded in passage here, we could save billions of dollars for U.S. taxpayers, not just from the U.S. Treasury, but also in the grocery bills of America's families. These savings could have extremely positive consequences for our economy if it was allowed to be used to support the economy. According to an Iowa State University study, if the sugar program were abolished, domestic sugar prices would fall by roughly a third. And earlier we were talking about 40%, saving consumers, said this study, at least $2.9 to $3.5 billion a year. And according to a recent report by the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, eliminating this subsidy today would save the federal government at least $116 million over 10 years. So here we have a subsidized program by the federal government costing consumers nearly $300 million a year. And here we have a second subsidized program by the federal government through its policies of pricing and unfair practices, in my opinion, costing nearly $116 million a year to the American taxpayer. This is a perfect example of an outdated government program that's hurting consumers and wasting taxpayers' dollars. And the net effect of the program is Americans are paying higher prices for sugar and more taxes to pay for the sugar subsidy. So what's a sweet deal for the sugar producers is a raw deal for the American consumer. And it's a subsidy, a package of subsidies that only go to the producers and deny the consumers the right to have a reasonable price for sugar in accordance with international pricing. I have joined with a bipartisan group of my colleagues in supporting legislation, the Sugar Reform Act, introduced by Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire, that would end the sugar subsidy. If we could pass this legislation, it would result in a savings of at least $116 million, according to the Congressional Budget Office. So today, I add to our chart $116 million of savings that the government can occur, moving our chart ever closer to our goal of $100 billion of savings. And we talk about how do we pay for some essential programs here? Where are we going to get the money? Well, why don't we start here? Why don't we start by eliminating some of these programs? Better yet, why don't we let the taxpayer keep their hard-earned money rather than sending it to Washington to pay for waste and abuse that occurs almost on a daily basis here. We're gradually creeping up to our $100 billion. I think we're going to have to go way beyond that because these examples just keep rolling in of how documented through nonpartisan agencies related to Congress and related to the federal government, and inspector generals and various programs here keep saying, why are we spending this money in the first place? The program is wasted, it's abused, it's misused, it doesn't need to be in place. So we're going to keep coming down here week after week talking about the waste of the week. Number 16 is on the way. Stay tuned. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor and note the absence of